Hollywood once sparkled with perfect smiles and untouchable stars. But Paul Newman knew the truth hiding behind the cameras. He saw mothers who terrorized their own children, megastars who lured underage girls into locked rooms, and on-set giants whose punches left colleagues bleeding on the floor. These weren't roles. They were real crimes Hollywood buried for decades, and the names Newman exposed. Some of the industry's most beloved icons. And one final name is chilling enough to rewrite everything you thought you knew. Let's uncover the list Paul Newman tried to warn Hollywood about. Number 1, Joan Crawford. Behind Joan Crawford's glamorous beauty was a mother whose cruelty chilled everyone who knew the truth. Paul Newman once reflected on her during a 1979 interview with the New York Times, leaning back in his chair as he said quietly, "Never believe an Oscar can hide the darkness in a family." Joan Crawford is the clearest proof. Hollywood adored her. In 1946, she accepted her Oscar from Mildred Pierce in a glowing white gown as the industry celebrated her comeback. But hours later, in her Brentwood mansion, the celebration turned into terror. A maid later testified that Crawford dragged her 11-year-old daughter Christina from bed, forced her to sing the national anthem, and slapped her so hard the sound echoed through the house. Christina would later call her childhood a gilded hell. Clothes hangers became punishment, ashtrays became weapons, and long sleeves in July hid bruises no one was allowed to see. Even emotional torment became ritual. An hourglass placed in her room forced kneeling before a crucifix, and punishments doubled for the slightest mistake. The contrast made it even more disturbing. Hollywood praised her as the perfect mother, even putting her on magazine covers. Yet, witnesses recalled Christina being beaten minutes before, posing with a smile. Crawford's cruelty didn't end with her death. When her will was read in 1977, the room froze at the line, cutting Christina and Christopher out entirely, for reasons which they well know. It was, as one lawyer whispered, the only time I saw a mother take revenge after death. Number 2, Bing Crosby. If Joan Crawford frightened people through control and violence, the next name Paul Newman mentioned inspired fear for an entirely different reason. That name was Bing Crosby. To the world, Crosby was the warm voice behind White Christmas. The Man Life magazine praised as the perfect father, and NBC proudly called America's model dad. But Newman saw something darker. In a 1982 Esquire interview, he said, quietly, "They call him the King of Christmas. To me, he was a jailer dressed as an angel. Behind the walls of Crosby's home Hills home, his children lived in constant terror. His eldest son, Gary, later wrote that he would hide in a corner at night, pillow clutched to his chest, waiting for the sound of his father's belt. On Larry King Live, Gary broke down as he admitted, "He never hugged me, only stared coldly as he swung." The trauma spread to the family. Lindsay Crosby spent years in psychiatric care, unable to hear Christmas music without shaking. Dennis Crosby left a heartbreaking note before his suicide in 1989, writing, "Every Christmas, the nightmare comes back. I'm too tired." Lindsay took his own life a year later. Others around Crosby saw the same brutality. A former tour musician told the Los Angeles Times he once heard shouting, a crack, a child sobs, then silence. Speaking up, he said, would have ended anyone's career. Some tried to excuse Crosby's behavior by pointing to his difficult upbringing, but Newman rejected that entirely. At a 1985 panel, he said, "Don't blame his childhood. He beat his kids because he enjoyed the power." The most disturbing part was the industry's silence. Studios depended on Crosby's wholesome image, and no one dared to ruin the illusion. The truth stayed buried beneath the sound of White Christmas No. 3, Errol Flynn. In the late 1930s, when The Adventures of Robin Hood premiered, Errol Flynn became an overnight sensation. Audiences adored his mischievous charm, and photoplay crowned the man every woman longed for and every man wanted to be. But behind the golden image, Hollywood buzzed with rumors, whispers that followed him from Beverly Hills to Sunset Strip. Everything exploded in 1942 when Flynn was charged with assaulting 2 underage girls. The Los Angeles Examiner plastered the case across its front pages, calling it Robin Hood in the dock. Prosecutors described wild parties in a Hollywood Hills apartment, and a witness later said Flynn walked in like a king, surrounded by faces far too young to understand such luxury. The courthouse overflowed with reporters and fans. Flynn was eventually acquitted, but as he walked out, he lit a cigarette and smirked. The ladies will still love this Robin Hood. Paul Newman later said he had never seen arrogance so naked. Hollywood celebrated the verdict, but insiders knew powerful studios and friendly journalists had helped shield him. The rumors only grew. Reporter Sheila Graham wrote in 1945 that if Flynn's mansion walls could speak, Hollywood would never want to hear the stories. Tales circulated about days-long parties, underage guests, and an environment where no one dare refuse him. One servant even claimed Flynn forced guests to sing on command and blacklisted anyone who resisted. Though unverified, it added to his unsettling reputation. Flynn's death in 1959 only deepened the mystery. At 50, he died in Vancouver, his body so damaged. The coroner said it resembled that of a much older man. The New York Post ran the headline, "Ropping Robin Hood Dead Leaves Behind a Legacy of Films and Secrets." What unsettled many was how Hollywood chose to remember him. Despite the whispers and shadows, the industry preserved the heroic legend and buried the darkness beneath it. Number 4, Mickey Rooney. Mickey Rooney's name still carried the shine of an American sweetheart, but Elizabeth Taylor remembered something very different. In 1974, during a private conversation, she broke down recalling her early MGM years. Paul Newman later told Vanity Fair that she whispered, "You don't understand. Mickey Rooney frightened me more than anyone." It was then Newman realized Hollywood's beloved boy had a far darker side. During the 1930s and 4S, Rooney was MGM's biggest moneymaker. The Andy Hardy films made him a symbol of innocence, even landing him on the cover of Life as a little star with the biggest smile. But behind the scenes, crew members described explosive outbursts and a temper that could turn violent in seconds. What haunted Elizabeth Taylor most was what happened when she was only 14. After National Velvet made her a sensation, Rooney, nearly 25 and already a top star, began pursuing her. A classmate later said Taylor wore thick sweaters in summer to avoid a stare, once whispering, "I just want to get out of here." Her diaries from that period spoke of sleepless nights and feeling trapped inside MGM's golden cage. Hollywood protected Rooney. Hader Hopper tried to hint at his behavior once, but MGM forced her to retract within a day. Editors were warned never to publish anything that tainted his image. Taylor carried the trauma through adulthood. Friends said she would fall silent whenever his name was mentioned. Rooney's private life mirrored the chaos. He married 8 times, bullied younger actresses, and burned through fortunes until he ended up nearly penniless. Insiders said he was simply tasting what he once sowed. By the end of his life, he needed legal protection from his own relatives. When Newman was asked about him at a press conference in 1982, he answered quietly, "Hollywood has smiles that hide darkness." Mickey Rooney was the clearest proof. To the public, he was a lovable star. To Elizabeth Taylor and others, he was a shadow they never forgot. Number 5, Bette Davis. Bette Davis was celebrated for her fierce talent and unforgettable presence, but those who worked with her often saw a very different side. All About Eve made her a legend, and critics praised her sharp delivery. But behind the scenes, she gained a reputation that frightened co-stars and crew alike. Her temper was infamous. A Warner Brothers makeup artist remembered moments when she could charm reporters 1 minute, then explode at a supporting actor the next for standing an inch out of place. People froze when she spoke. Some left the set in tears. The tension reached its peak on Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, 1962, where a feud with Joan Crawford turned the production into what Variety called a battlefield. In one scene, Davis shoved Crawford so hard she ended up in the hospital. Asked about it later, Davis simply said, "If she got hurt, that's her problem." Crawford later retaliated by hiding metal weights under her costume, causing Davis to strain her back during a dragging scene. She treated others the same way. On The Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex, she slapped Errol Flynn so hard the mark stayed for minutes. Another actor recalled quitting the business after Davis hit him with a script for forgetting a line. Even crew members dreaded hearing her heels in the hallway, a signal to brace for the storm. From Paul Newman, who witnessed her publicly humiliating a young actress, later said, "No one denies Bette's talent, but I've never seen a woman spread so much fear on a set." Number 6, Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich moved through Hollywood like a force of nature, dazzling, hypnotic, and dangerous to anyone who got too close. At a Beverly Hills party in 1955, she entered in a black tuxedo with a cigarette holder, and the room fell silent. One reporter later said it felt as if she had arrived to choose her prey. Dietrich was far more than the star of the Blue Angel. She treated seduction like strategy, turning every relationship into a game of power. Many who loved her ended up broken. Jean Gabon, once considered her great love, withdrew into depression after she left him. Writer Eric Maria remarked, found his wealth drained as she spent his royalties on her extravagant lifestyle. Women were not spared either. Rumors tied Dietrich to Greta Garbo, who retreated deeper into isolation afterward. Mercedes D'Acosta, a screenwriter she used for connections, died poor and forgotten. Even Claudette Colbert reportedly paid the price for crossing her, enduring years of painful gossip. Some stories were even darker. Edith Piaf, after an affair with Dietrich, spiraled into alcohol and pills, friends recalling her collapsing backstage in heartbreak. And in Hollywood, a young actress who left her career to follow Dietrich later died by suicide, leaving behind a note with just 3 words. "I hate you." Dietrich's own daughter, Maria Riva, wrote that growing up with her meant watching people treated like props, discarded the moment they no longer serve her. Many believe Dietrich's hunger for control began in her youth in Germany, where she learned that charm and seduction could open any door. Love to her was never about sharing, only domination. Paul Newman, who managed to avoid being pulled into her orbit, summarized her best. Marlene treated emotion like playing cards. She played better than anyone, but behind her, all you saw were losers. Number 7, Kirk Douglas. Kirk Douglas was celebrated as the embodiment of Hollywood masculinity, the fearless hero of Spartacus. But away from the screen, he carried a reputation that haunted Hollywood for decades. While Bing Crosby terrified his family, Douglas shook the industry with persistent rumors about his predatory behavior toward very young girls, especially those under 20. Whispers about him began in the 1950s, but were quietly buried by studios who saw him as too profitable to expose. The most disturbing allegation involved Natalie Wood. In 1954, at just 15, she was taken by her mother to the Chateau Marmont for what was described as a mentoring meeting with Douglas. According to her sister Lana's memoir, the teenager returned hours later shaken and in tears. In her diary, she wrote, "I must stay silent if I want to keep acting, but I feel filthy." Hollywood kept the story hidden for decades, even after Wood's mysterious drowning in 1980. Hints resurfaced, but were quickly dismissed. She wasn't the only one. Former studio workers recalled Douglas routinely inviting very young girls into his dressing room and punishing those who refused. Despite the rumors, Douglas continued to be celebrated. He received the Medal of Freedom in 1996 and an honorary Oscar in 2004. While he made emotional speeches about inspiring young people, many actresses in the audience exchanged uneasy looks. Paul Newman later said in a 60 Minutes interview, "Spartacus may have been a hero, but Kirk Douglas was never a hero, not to the young girls he hunted." Number 8, Gloria Swanson. In the 1920s, Gloria Swanson reigned as Hollywood's silent film queen. She floated down red carpets in sequin gowns and fur trains. Carry herself like royalty photoplay once wrote that she didn't just act. She turned her entire life into a stage. But behind the glamour, that stage became a trap for everyone around her. In 1928, she starred in Queen Kelly, a lavish production directed by Erich von Stroheim. What began as a visionary project quickly descended into chaos. Swanson demanded new costumes because the colors didn't flatter her eyes and ordered entire sets rebuilt to inspire her performance. Crew members later recalled hundreds of laborers collapsing from exhaustion as costs spiraled out of control. Stroheim was fired. The production shut down, and Queen Kelly became one of Hollywood's most notorious disasters. Off-screen, Swanson lived with the same extravagance during Great Depression, while millions struggled to eat. She rode in gold-plated limousines and bought diamonds weekly. Reporters wrote bitterly that while the public begged for bread, she paid jewelers to decorate her gloves. Her ego isolated her. As sound films arrived, other silent stars adapted. But Swanson refused to believe her era was ending. When films failed, she blamed directors, studios, and even audiences she deemed too unsophisticated to appreciate her brilliance. Critics began calling her a diva destroyer. Paul Newman later said, "Hollywood never forgives those who make entire crews suffer for their ego," and Swanson became the industry's prime example. In her later years, she lived surrounded by mirrors, dresses, and jewels, but few people. Her comeback in Sunset Boulevard 1950, playing a delusional former star, struck audiences as painfully close to her real life. In the end, Swanson's brilliance burned itself out, taking careers, crews, and fortunes with it. Number 9, Sal Mano. Salman M.O., the young star of Rebel Without a Cause, 1955, was once seen as the next James Dean, but being open about his sexuality came at a painful cost. Hollywood distanced itself. The roles disappeared, and the press mocked him for what the New York Times later described as honesty punished. Publicly, M.O. was in a relationship with stage actor Courtney Burthery. Privately, some claimed he had a complicated and secret connection with Paul Newman, a rumor fueled by sightings of Newman visiting Moe's apartment. Late at night, one bartender remembered seeing M.O. nervously light a cigarette while Newman rested a hand on his shoulder. After Maneo's death, a diary attributed to him reportedly contained a troubling line. "I love Courtney, but Newman is my greatest fear. If the truth comes out, I'll pay the price." Whether the diary was authentic has long been debated. On February 12, 1976, Mano was fatally stabbed outside his West Hollywood home. Police quickly arrested a drifter and called it a robbery, but the case was riddled with inconsistencies, missing evidence, conflicting witnesses, and a confession many believed was coerced. Speculation only grew when Moe's apartment was later found ransacked and certain papers missing. A building manager even claimed someone resembling Newman was seen entering the building, though this was never verified. Around the same time, leaked financial records described unexplained transfers connected to a Newman Associated fund, fueling further conspiracy.